Welcome to my house. Welcome to the Structure Talk podcast, a production of Structure Tech Home Inspections. My name is Ruben Saltzman. I'm your host, alongside building science geek Tessa Murray. We help home inspectors up their game through education, and we help homeowners to be better stewards of their houses. We've been keeping it real on this podcast since 2019, and we are also the #1 home inspection podcast in the world, according to my mom. All right, Tessa, so what's happening in your world? What's going on? What's new?
Hey, Ruben. Well, I guess the latest news, I just got back from a week trip to Florida. Actually, it was very last minute. One of my friend's brother died, and they were flying up to Connecticut to go to the funeral and everything. And they have this dog who's like their child, and they needed someone to watch the dog and watch their house while they were gone. And so I volunteered to do that. I'm like, sure. I'd be happy to come down to Florida in February in Minnesota to escape the cold. And I had perfect timing. I was flying out the morning that the blizzard was moving in.
Yes.
So all these flights after mine got canceled, and it was a disaster, I think. I made it out just in time. Yeah, and it was literally like 85 degrees and sunny the entire time I was there. And they lived 10 minutes from the beach. So the dog and I, Mavis, spent lots of time on the beach together.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And just soaking up the sun as much as I could.
Yeah.
So that was pretty nice.
You don't look like you got a ton of color.
Well, thank you so much for noticing. I used an SPF 50 and I was very responsible. No, I did get a little bit. I got a little bit of color, but I am so pale that Florida sun was just going to fry me if I didn't wear sunscreen. And so I avoided actually the sun from like noon to 2 most days. I just stayed inside. And then the rest of the time I was like lathering on the sunscreen.
Okay. All right. You're much smarter than I am, because I was in a warm climate recently, and
I was going to ask you, tell me what you've been up to, Ruben. You've been busy too.
Well, I was out of town. I mean, we had a family vacation in Mexico, and then I had a business thing in Puerto Rico, and they were right next to each other. Not intentionally. I didn't plan this, but it ended up happening that way. So a lot of sun, a lot of peeling skin. I am not as smart as you. I definitely did use the SPF 50, but not the first day on both days. I first had to get super burnt and then do it. So yeah, I'm going to deal with skin cancer at some point later on in my life. Yeah.
Skin cancer is a thing in my family, so that's why I'm like extra cautious. But it is easy you just forget, and you're like, yes, sun, I haven't seen this in so long. And you stay out in it way too long. Your skin isn't used to it. Next thing you know, you're bright red lobster. So
Yes. You know what, Tessa, I'm just reminded of something. I think it was the last podcast, or maybe the one before, where we were talking about doppelgangers. And we identified your doppelganger, and we put that in the podcast, and we were joking around that I don't have one, but I had a listener write in, and he sent me an email, and he said, maybe I've got your doppelganger. No, I don't totally see this, but I'm delighted with it anyway, because it was one of my favorite movies of all time growing up.
What is it? What was it?
I'll tell you what it was. It was Leon the Professional. Did you ever watch that movie?
No. Nope.
Okay.
Googling it right now.
Okay. All right. Let me see if I can get this up on the screen here for us. Okay. So there we are. There's Leon the Professional and me. I don't totally see it, but there's a little bit of a resemblance. What do you think?
Yeah, that is kind of funny. Maybe I can see it a little bit. It's not perfect, but there's some similarities maybe.
Yeah. Did you ever watch that movie? No? Oh,
no.
Okay.
I haven't. This was one of your favorites, you said?
Well, yeah, well worth a watch. It's about this guy who is a hitman, and now you know why I like it. He's a hitman, and he ends up training this little girl to be a hitman. She's like 12 years old, and her family gets killed by these people, and he ends up training her to be a hitman. It's it's a touching movie. It really was. It was really a sweet movie. But yeah, okay. All right. Just had to share that. Total
A
tangent.
hitman teaches a 12-year-old girl to kill people after her family's murdered. It's
Yep.
very sweet.
It is.
It's
It is.
touching and
They have a
sweet.
lot of moments together. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm going to have to watch it. I'll put it on my list.
Yep.
We'll see.
Yep. Leon the Professional.
Leon the Professional. Hilarious.
All right. So, getting into some home related stuff.
What do you want to talk about today? What's the topic?
Well, today's topic comes from a blog reader, I think. I can't remember where this question came from, but the question was, what should I do with my house if I'm leaving town? If I'm going to be gone for, a few weeks, maybe a month or so, I've got a Minnesota home. What do I do to help make sure that it's not going to melt down? It's not going to turn into a winter wonderland. I'm not going to have problems. What kind of stuff do you do in a cold climate when you're leaving your house for a long time? And this person,
a good question.
Yeah, they had suggested a bunch of things that they had heard. And I thought, there's got to be a lot of good and bad information about what you should do out there. So let's talk about it.
Well, this is going to be fun. Yeah. I'm assuming you're writing a blog about this.
You know it.
Exactly.
Link in the
show notes.
In fact,
good.
I've already posted. I posted this on February 21st. So if you want to read along on these podcasts, sometimes we cover more, sometimes we cover less than what we intended to. But I got it broken down into kind of the different categories. And probably number 1, 2, and 3 ought to be plumbing. I think that's one of the things that can really go wrong with the house. Number 1, when you're leaving town, turn the water off. This is super quick, super easy. Every homeowner should know where their main water shutoff valve is. Go ahead and turn it off. If anything bad happens while you're gone, you're not going to have a catastrophic leak.
Now, would you recommend this even if you're not living in a place where the temperatures get below freezing and there's potential for frozen pipes?
I
bursting?
would.
Like you're talking about just anyone, anywhere in general, turn off the main water in your house.
Good point, Tess. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't care if it's Florida, wherever. If some pipe bursts, if something ruptures, you're not going to have some nasty mess to come home to. I think it's always a good idea to shut off the water when you're going to be gone for an extended period of time.
Here's another question for you too. Would you recommend then after you turn off the water at the main, then letting the water run at the fixtures just to make sure all the pipes are empty?
I don't think that's critical. No.
That's not necessary?
No. You really don't need to. There's not going to be much in there. I mean, if something does spring a leak, it's going to be pretty minor. And if it's in a cold climate, let's say your furnace goes out and everything freezes, unless you're actually going to go through the trouble of winterizing your house where you're draining all the water out and you're getting all of the water out of all of the traps, you're still going to have problems. I mean, my parents had that happen at their cabin once where the heat went out and they had shut off the water before they left, but the heat went out and I think both of the toilets ended up getting destroyed because there's still water in the toilets, and then it ended up freezing and kind of bursting. So they still had some water damage to deal with, but I don't think it was an insurance claim. It wasn't that big of a deal.
It wasn't catastrophic. Yeah.
It was just kind of, oh, great. This is a mess. We're going to have to clean this up. But not catastrophic. The one caution there, though, is that the one thing that might rely on water on a daily basis in a cold climate, cold, dry house would be a whole house humidifier. Now here I'm defending a humidifier. What do you think about that, Pat?
Well, after spending a week in sunny Florida where the humidity is high, I have to say, coming back to Minnesota winter, it just feels so dry. It's so brutal. So you're catching me at an off time where I'm actually feeling like I wish there was a little bit more humidity in the air. My throat is dry. My skin is getting dry. It impacts everything. I'll say still in general, people misuse their whole house humidifiers and they can be dangerous for your house. You have to be really careful with them, but I understand why people use them. Yep.
And if you've got, say newer hardwood floors and you want to keep them looking pristine and you got to keep the humidity in the 30 to 40% range. If you shut off all the water to your house, your humidifier is not going to be running. You do have the potential to have stuff dry out. So that'd be the one caution, the one one thing to think about if you are going to do this.
You have really thought about this. That is impressive,
Well,
Ruben. Didn't even cross my mind, but yeah.
I was just trying to think about what automatically uses water, and that's one of the
Huh.
few things you got in the house. So something
True.
to consider if you're going to be gone for a long time, maybe a couple of months. We talked about the traps. You've got traps in your toilets and your sinks and all that. You do have the potential for that water to dry out after several months. And the purpose of the trap is to prevent sewer gas from entering in your house. And if all of that water dries out, sewer gas is going to come in. What do? Well, there is a solution there. And you take RV antifreeze. It's stuff you can buy at any home improvement store or Fleet Farm or whatever. And it's not expensive. It's probably, I want to say $5 a gallon, but since COVID, it feels like prices have doubled on everything. So maybe $10 a gallon today. But you buy
if you can find it.
Yeah. But you buy this stuff and you pour it into your traps, and that's what it's for. It will not evaporate and it will not freeze. So if you're going to be gone for, maybe more than a month, maybe you want to get some RV antifreeze and pour that in your traps. Anywhere water goes down, your kitchen sink, your shower, your bathtub, your toilets, your bathroom sinks, all these different places. Pour some RV antifreeze in there. Not a critical thing, but not a bad idea.
We've talked about that. Yeah. And we've talked about that in the past too, with like basement floor drains, a lot of times that don't see a lot of water. And they can dry out frequently. That it's just a good idea you can pour some RV antifreeze down those too, so you don't have sewer gases coming in. But one question I have for you is that stuff really harmful for the environment? You may not be able to answer that, but I
think it's like, it's some type of alcohol. As far as I know, there is zero harm for the environment. I mean, its sole purpose is to do this. It's not like you're taking some other product that's really meant to be doing this, and then you're just dumping in your drains. This is a product that's specifically designed to go in your drains, and I'm assuming not cause damage to the environment. I haven't researched it, to be honest.
Right.
But I can't imagine it'd be harmful.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I was just curious about that. So thanks for answering my question.
Certainly.
So turning off the water, pouring RV antifreeze down traps that might dry out if you're gone longer than a few months. Yep. And then what else would you recommend? You said there's 3 things. Plumbing.
That's probably, I just joke that this should be items 1, 2, and 3 on the list.
Gotcha.
Plumbing is the most important, but a couple of things that I've heard that I want to just say you don't need to do. One is flushing your toilets on a regular basis. I've heard that your seals might dry out if you're not flushing your toilet regularly. I ran this by a few plumbers. I mean, I had never heard of such a thing. Ran this by a few plumbers, and they all said, what you talking about, Ruben? No, that does not happen. So,
all right. Myth busted.
Yeah. You've got wax rings, or you've got synthetic rings on your toilets. They're not going to dry out and start leaking. You don't need to worry about doing that. So just want to get rid of that myth. And then, one other thing to think about, I don't really have much of an opinion on this, would be turning down the temperature on your water heater. Water heaters all come, gas water heaters, they got that setting called vacation. And so if you're going on vacation, it would make sense to turn it to the vacation setting. I don't think you're going to save anything noticeable in your gas bill by doing that. I mean, let's think about it. You've got groundwater in Minnesota coming in. It's going to be really cold. Average temp is like 45 degrees. And we got to bring it up to whatever you keep your water heater at, say 120 degrees. So that's a big jump. But once it's already brought up to there, the coldest it's going to get, if you don't do anything, is going to be the temperature in your house, maybe 70 degrees. So all we're really doing is making up that extra 50 degrees. And once it gets hot, it stays hot for a long time. It takes a long time for that water to cool down. And when you don't have cold water constantly entering from people using it, you're not going to have nearly as much demand. I would really like to do a long-term test. If I can get my hands on some type of gas flow meter, I would love to attach it to my water heater and just measure how much is actually used in a week if nobody's running water. Now, I'll have to do it if I'm on vacation or something, but I'd like to do a test. But I suspect it's going to be a very minimal amount of gas that's used. Not only that, but when you turn it down to that vacation setting, it's going to be 80 degrees or whatever it is, you're going to increase the potential for Legionella bacteria to grow in your water heater. And
Ugh.
that's not a good thing. So
Yeah.
I would prefer to just not have to think about that, not risk it. When I leave town, I leave my water heater exactly the way that it is. I don't touch it.
If you were to turn your water heater back up, obviously when you get home, if you did put it on vacation mode, wouldn't just that increased temperature cook the bacteria in the tank?
I thought about that, and I think it probably would. You'd probably need to crank it up all the way to high to kill everything. And I'm concerned that you're going to still have that bacteria in there, and maybe it's going to have leached into the rest of the pipes, and it's
Sure.
going to be sitting somewhere between the water heater and the pipe.
Mm.
And then if you don't use the fixture that water goes to for a week, maybe it really will have festered, and then you take a shower where it's atomized and airborne. And I just think, I don't want to deal with all that. But
yeah, and like you said, I mean, the water heater's not going to be running that much since no one's home and no one's using the water. What do you think? Like maybe $10 for like a month of not using hot water and the gas just coming on
at most,
periodically?
At most, I mean, I remember I did kind of a long-term test at my own house where I measured how much was being used at my own house during July. And this was at a time where my water heater was the only gas appliance I had. I had a gas stove too, but I wasn't counting that just because I don't use my stove much. I just assumed it all went to the water heater. And you've got these fixed gas delivery charges, like, $7 a month to have gas, and then another $3 for this. Once I added up the actual cost for the gas usage, it ended up being about $12 a month that I was paying. And that was living there.
Wow, that was living there. So probably safe to say less than $12 if you're not using it at all.
Probably so. Now, on the other hand, this was a decade ago, so prices have probably doubled since then.
Okay. Yeah.
But still.
Right. But a small price to pay if you don't want to have to even think about like potential bacteria growth and all of that happening. It's not like you're spending hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I don't mess with it. If you do turn it down, I don't think it's the end of the world. Probably a very slim chance of this bacteria growing anyway, but I'd rather not.
And what about people that have electric water heaters? Because typically on those, it's not as easy to adjust the temperature on a tank like electric water heater.
I wouldn't even mess with it. I mean, on electric water heaters to adjust the temperature, you gotta unscrew those panels, and then you gotta reach in there where you have live contacts, and you gotta turn this knob. Just leave it alone.
So if you've got electric, don't touch it.
And I may have shared this anecdote on our podcast before. I'm sure I have. But Tess, I remember one time we went to my parents' cabin, and we always, we always shut the water off when we leave, and then who knows when we're going to be back. We come back to the cabin after having been gone for a week, and we hung out all Friday afternoon, Friday evening, and then Saturday we're doing dishes in the morning, and we're noticing the water's not really that hot. It was hot on Friday, but it started to really cool down. And I'm thinking, there's something wrong with the water heater. I got to go check this out. I go downstairs to check it out. The breaker was off. The breaker had been off for a week. And and the water was still that hot.
You're kidding.
After having, from Sunday to Friday, the water was still hot, so hot that we didn't even know that it was turned off. And who knows how much longer it would have stayed hot had we not been running all this water, filling the tank with cold water. Yeah.
How big was the tank?
Oh, it's one of those gigantic, it's a marathon 100-gallon tank, super insulated. It's not your traditional 40 or 50-gallon tank, but still.
Right. I can't believe that your family, over a week, it didn't use all the water in the tank, 100-gallon tank.
It didn't cool down.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it either.
That is amazing.
Yeah. Maybe I didn't explain it right. We left on a Sunday, and then it sat unused all week, and then we came back on a Friday. So it was it was a day's worth of usage that let us know that it's cold.
Right. You weren't using the water. It was just sitting there in the tank, and it stayed warm that entire time because of the super insulated tank.
Yep.
That's really interesting. Along those lines, and you might talk about this in your blog, but what do you feel what's your recommendation about anything electrical? Should people turn things off in their panel at all?
Great question. And that's something I didn't cover in my blog, but I did have a listener write in, or a reader, I should say, write in and suggest that might be a good thing to do. He says that he likes to unplug everything that might use electricity. I think you said the
Mhm.
refrigerator. Now, for me, I'm going to be leaving stuff in my refrigerator. I'm not touching
Yeah.
that. But anything that might have kind of what they might refer to as a phantom load,
Quantum.
where it's a really
Mhm.
small draw, like unplug your microwave because you got a clock there, unplug the stove, unplug all these different things. My two
Yeah.
cents on that is this phantom load is so minor. I mean, you remember we did a discussion recently about how much electricity are you using when you leave an LED light on all night. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's a laughably small amount, like 2 cents or
Yeah.
something. So
Yeah.
I'd say the time you take to unplug all this stuff is probably not worth your effort. I
Huh.
don't do it. I wouldn't do it.
That would be another interesting test, or a hypothesis I'd like to see you do an experiment on someday.
Oh, I could do it really easily. I've got that Sense home energy monitor at my house,
Oh yeah.
and I
Yeah.
could go around my house and just shut off everything that's a known power draw, and
Yep.
I'll just leave all of my phantom stuff plugged in, and I'll tell you how many watts it's drawing, and then we'll do the
Yes.
math, and
Yep.
we'll see what it actually costs you over a month. Look for that
That
blog
would be
post.
Yes, that will be very interesting.
Okay.
Very, very interesting. And, you can put down too how many TVs and how many computers and kind of just give people an idea of the
Yeah.
size of the house so they can compare theirs.
Yeah. Although one thing I will say is the computer, go ahead and shut those off. Those do pull
Yeah.
some power. No question about it.
For anyone that has not seen Ruben's workstation, do you want to describe what your command central station looks like?
I've got the 3 monitors and the mics and the cameras and I've got a nice
The
little
lights,
setup here.
everything. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And even your desk moves, right?
I've got
Up and down.
I've got the
So-
sit stand desk, which really has turned into a stand desk. I really just
Stand
don't
desk.
sit at it anymore. Yeah.
The only thing you're missing is a treadmill now, so you can just walk in place.
Oh, that's next. Great idea, Tess.
I can't believe you haven't done it already.
I know. I really should.
Uh,
All right. So next one will be your heat. I strongly recommend for anybody, no matter what, get a smart thermostat. I love these things. And it's not that big of a deal to install them. They come with really simple instructions on how to do it. And you pop this thing in, it's connected to your Wi-Fi. And by the way, don't unplug your Wi-Fi. You want your smart devices talking to you while you're gone. But your thermostat can talk to you. And we've got the Ecobee at my house.
mhm.
And when we leave, we've got these little things. You pull it up in the app on your phone, and it says, all right, what type of alerts do you want? And I've got it set. Well, if the temperature drops below 50 degrees, it's going to send me a message. If it goes above 90 degrees, it's going to send me a message. You can set it up. If humidity gets too low, you can send a message. And you got all these little alerts. Or humidity gets too high too.
Yeah.
I should set that. I don't have those set up, but boy, like
Yeah,
if my humidity
that'd be good
gets
to
to
know.
60 degrees or something, there's probably a leak. There's probably something really
Something's
wrong.
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of having those. And go ahead and turn down the temperature at your house. What do you think is a safe temp to set it to, Tess?
Well, first of all, turn down your temp if you're living in a heating climate. But if you're living in a cooling climate, turn your temperature up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Just depending on where you're at to try and save energy, But I think, gosh, I guess that's personal preference. You don't obviously want your pipes to freeze or anything else, to get damaged in your house. So 50s? Is that too cold?
That's what I suggested. I said somewhere in the neighborhood of 55 is probably a good safe
Okay.
temperature.
Yeah.
Now, the one caution I'd have is that if you've got your house on the edge of a cliff, and I guess I should define that. I mean, if you're right on the edge of things not performing right at 70
Mhm.
degrees, this could push it over the edge and you could have problems. And I bring that up because there was somebody's house that a bunch of people at the structure tech team volunteered and did some work at. And this woman's house, she had a frozen water line going to her dishwasher, and the water line just passed really close to an outside wall that apparently was really poorly insulated. And even though she kept her house at 70 degrees, there was kind of a cold snap and her water line froze. So I mean,
Yeah.
if you were to take her house and drop it down to 55 degrees, even during
The pipe has no
cool
chance.
weather, yeah, it's going to freeze.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you are getting closer to having problems when you make any changes like that. But properly built house, properly insulated walls, all of that, you shouldn't have any problems dropping the temp down to 55 degrees. And you'll save some money on your heating bills.
Yep, that's a really good point that you make, Ruben. Every house is going to be different, and the contents in your house are going to be different too. So it's up to you to decide.
Yep.
But,
I'd say the last category I filed under no duh. These are just kind of common sense things, but I'll throw out a couple of reminders, a couple of recommendations for people. One of them is, I mean, if you're in Minnesota or a cold climate, think about snow removal, because nothing says we're on vacation and there ain't no one living here like a driveway with no footprints and no tracks when it hasn't snowed for several days. That makes it really clear there's nobody living there.
Right,
So
right.
Think about snow removal. Another would be having some automatic timers on some lights. Have some lights turn on at dusk. I mean, in the dead of winter, it's dark at 5 o'clock. When all the lights are off all night, that looks pretty obvious that there's nobody living there.
Yeah.
If you've got mail, make sure your mail isn't coming. This is just so no duh. If you get the newspaper, who still gets the newspaper, Tess?
There are people. A lot of people are reading things online and digitally, but occasionally I'll see newspapers laying out.
Yep. If you get the newspaper, stop your newspaper delivery. Don't let it pile up in your porch. Yeah. I've got the cover of this blog post was a photo I took. That must have been 20 newspapers stacked in somebody's porch. I mean, at some point, wouldn't the delivery person stop? Just stop putting it.
It's their job. They have one job. And they're doing it well.
I'll tell you what. My first real job was delivering newspapers. And even at 13 or 14 years old, whatever it was, I knew that if I came to a house and there's already 3 newspapers, don't give them a 4th. Just stop, knock it off. They're not going to complain, and it makes it look bad. So I knew that when I was a kid. I would hope newspaper delivery people today would know that, but who knows?
How long did you do that job, Ruben?
If it was more than a day, it was too long. That was the worst job. It's the only job that I didn't enjoy. I've enjoyed every other job since, but that was dreadful because my dad and my brother and I would get up at 3 or 4 in the morning. We'd go to the station.
That's not any different than your normal life, though.
Well, I'm a little older now. I mean, at the time, I was in junior high. And
don't you Saltzmans wake up at 4 in the morning?
We do. We are early risers. But at the time, it was very unnatural. And so, we'd have sleepovers, whatever. We'd have friends over. My dad would come wake us up. And then we'd go stuff newspapers at the station. And then we'd deliver them. And for what we got paid, it was some of the worst money I ever had. And my dad, what a fantastic person for doing this with us. He just did it for free. And my brother and I got all the money for it. I mean, he was just helping us have a job and earn some income. It was so great of him. But looking back, I'd rather do almost anything than that.
You know what? It taught you something very important, though.
What? Tell me.
Hard work and then appreciating just that money doesn't grow on trees. And so
you're right, Tessa. And it made me appreciate every other job I've had since so much more.
Exactly. The bar is set very low.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Although I will
invaluable
say,
experience.
We're talking about now. I just got to share. One of my fondest memories was the snowstorm of 1991, where it snowed over Halloween for 3 days, and we got about 3 feet of snow. And that was one of our first weeks ever delivering newspapers. And we were the only ones at the station. And we were trudging through that snow, 3 feet of snow, whatever it was. And we brought everybody's newspaper to their house. We got it done. And it was actually kind of fun. It was a lot of work.
Oh my gosh.
It took us a couple hours to do our delivery, but it was a fun time.
That's amazing. Did you normally do it on a bike? Or
no,
would you walk?
My dad had a Suburban, and we'd throw all the newspapers in there. My brother and I would stand on the rails on the outside, and he'd drive us from kind of block to block, and we'd just hang on the sides and kind of surf.
Oh my gosh. Your dad is amazing. He drove you on your newspaper
Oh, yeah.
route.
Yeah. He was all about it. Yeah,
Best dad ever.
for sure.
Oh,
For sure.
wow.
Eternally grateful for all that time spent.
That is epic.
Yeah. All right.
Wow. Okay, sorry, I took us off topic.
No,
but,
that's okay. It's fun story.
yeah, just basic security things. I appreciate you thinking about that because, yeah, when you're gone for a long time, you want to make sure your house is secure and, people don't target it. And so, yeah, think about snow, think about deliveries, all of that.
Yeah.
Mail,
And the other obvious stuff, like take your trash out before you leave, figure out who's going to take your trash out to the street and put your bins away. And don't leave perishable food sitting on your counters or in your fridge. Just the really obvious stuff.
Yep.
I'm not going to get a big list of that. But
the basics.
That's really all I can think of. I racked my brain on what else you could do. I couldn't come up with anything else. You got anything I'm missing, Tess?
Man, if you've racked your brain, no. I think you've covered all the really important stuff. I think the main things I'm used to people asking about is plumbing, mainly. Plumbing and, is this something we need to worry about? And then maybe some electrical things too. So I'm glad you covered that, and it'll be good to have a blog to direct people to.
Yeah, I need two of them. I need one on phantom loads. What's all this stuff that I do? And then I need one on what does your water heater actually use sitting stagnant. But if any listeners got any ideas on where I could find a little meter to measure how much natural gas is being used at one appliance, I don't know where to find that. That's it.
Please help us.
Shoot me an email. Okay.
Email
the show, podcast@structuretech.com.
Yes, perfect.
All right. Cool.
Very good.
We're done.